Thank you very much for the invitation. So I will recall first that, of course, the Nicolas Bourbaki group was founded in 1934-1935, and it consisted of mathematicians, a great majority of whom have studied at the École Normale Supérieure, and who were involved in a vast editorial undertaking known as the Eléments de mathématique. The first fascicle of the Eléments was published in 1939. This work, which is still in progress, is representative of a structural conception of pure mathematics dealing with mathematical domains or structures such as topology, algebra, topological vector spaces, integration, commutative algebra, and also Lie groups and Lie algebras. The archives of the Bourbaki group, mainly preserved in Nancy and in Paris, make it possible to reconstruct in detail the genesis of this collective work. The history of the group in its early days was studied by Liliane Beaulieu, as you know, in 1989, and has been recently explored in a great depth by Gatien-Ricotier in his thesis. In a 1999 article, Liliane Beaulieu also took an interest in the weight of the socializing experience of Bourbaki members within the ENS. The connections between Bourbaki, certain representatives of the structuralism in human sciences, as well as members of the Ouvroir de littérature potentielle, have been analyzed and discussed by David Aubin in a 1997 article belonging to Cultural History of Science. The a posteriori reconstructions, the commemorative accounts of the rewriting of history of mathematics proposed by Bourbaki in their speeches, or in the historical notes accompanying the fascicles of the Elements, have been questioned and duly challenged by historians of mathematics in a series of contributions focusing on the Great War and the Interwar period. I shall refer here to Hélène Gisbert, Juliette Leloup, Catherine Goldstein, and of course, again, David Aubin with his book, L'élite sous la mitraille. More recently, historian of science Pierre Verschuren questioned a Bourbaki narrative on its supposed hegemony in the field of mathematics in France between the 1950s and the 1970s. To this end, he extensively analyzed the composition of the doctoral thesis committees in mathematics at the Faculty of Science in Paris between 1944 and 1968, and his research offers a rather composite picture of the mathematical field in France at that time, so that the rise of Bourbaki in the 1950s never resulted in any form of hegemony. Most of the previous mentioned contribution considered the history of the Nicolas Bourbaki group in terms of its institutional anchoring at the ENS, or in terms of the role it played within the French mathematics scene until the 1970s. Through their case study on Laurent Schwartz's theory of distributions, Michael Barani, Anne-Sandrine Pommier, and Jasper Lutzen have taken a different approach. They have tried to understand the conditions under which this theory gained international recognition between 1947 and 1950. Barani, Pommier, and Lutzen have shown in particular that the International Conference on Harmonic Analysis, organized by Jean Delsarte in Nancy in June 1947, with the support of the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique and the Rockefeller Foundation, gave a decisive impetus to the internationalization of Laurent Schwartz's theory of distributions. This 1947 conference also constituted, in this, and this merits more detailed study, the starting point of a project for an international center in mathematics based in Nancy, whose first informal activities extended from 1947 to 1953, before officially becoming the Élie Cartan Institute, Institut Élie Cartan. So, in this presentation, I intend first to analyze the different strategies employed by Bourbaki members to ensure that the fascicles of the Éléments reached a national, but also an international audience. It should be borne in mind that the group very quickly took on an international dimension as a US branch of Bourbaki began to develop under the impetus of Claude Chevalet as well as André Weil. These strategies were manifold, participation in international conferences or congresses, setting up of the Bourbaki seminar in Paris, which helped Bourbaki members to quickly familiarize themselves with international scientific literature, etc. I then intend to focus on the early years of the Mathematics Research Center initiated by Jean Delsarte in 1947 in Nancy, to which he immediately gave an international dimension. The purpose of this center was threefold: to organize advanced level courses and seminars whose topics partially overlap with those by the Eléments, the mathématique, to welcome students from the ENS with a view to their possible recruitment as Bourbaki members, and to enable foreign students and professors to stay in Nancy for a few months to develop their own research. I shall refer here for instance, to Georges Mackay. Finally, I will show that with the Eléments, Bourbaki members quickly conceived their reform of academic mathematics on an international scale. To this end, I will focus on the topology dictionary published in 1949 that accompanied chapter 10 of the topology book, because it provides a striking overview of the huge terminological and conceptual reform undertaken by Bourbaki in this field. Bourbaki members then wanted to unify the terminologies in use. With this terminological reform, they also aimed at marginalizing works such as Fréchet's, which, with the publication of Bourbaki's topology fascicles, were struck by a form of terminological and conceptual obsolescence. So, first part. By the end of World War II, several Bourbaki members already enjoyed, or were about to enjoy, international recognition in their fields of specialization. I can give some examples, of course, Henri Cartan, Claude Chevalet, Jean Dieudonné, Charles Erasmus, Laurent Schwartz, as well as André Weil, but also Roger Godement, Pierre Samuel, and later Jean-Pierre Serre. The Bourbaki group was represented in Strasbourg, in Nancy, in Paris. Chevalet worked at Princeton since 1938, then in Columbia. Samuel defended his thesis at Princeton, and Weil became a professor at the University of Chicago in 1947. International academic recognition of Bourbaki members after World War II was also attested to by the numerous stays of its members abroad, including that of Delsarte at the IAS between January and May 1947. One may wonder whether Bourbaki was becoming more international in its very composition, which is known to us through the reports of Bourbaki congresses, Congrès Bourbaki, during which Bourbaki drafts were discussed. However, it turns out that the vast majority of Bourbaki members belong to a mathematical elite from the ENS, which bears witness to the very localized recruitment policy. Indeed, from the fall of 1940, Henri Cartan taught at the ENS, and he preselected ENS students likely to join the group, including Jean-Louis Cossul, Jacques Dixmier, and Jean-Pierre Serre. So, a review of the list of participants in these Bourbaki congresses showed that Georges Mackay was the first foreign visitor at congresses which took place in Nancy in 1950, and he was invited there during that time. Samuel Eilenberg, who became a Bourbaki member, took part in his first Bourbaki Congress as a member of the group in 1950, having worked since at least 1946 with Chevalet and then also with Henri Cartan. Here is a list of other foreign mathematicians who attended Bourbaki Congresses or who became members of Bourbaki between 1945 and 1960. So Armand Borel became a Bourbaki member, like Serge Lang, but also John Tate. Okay. Several mathematics seminars were established in Paris at the end of the Second World War. The Bourbaki Seminar, created in 1945, the Albert Châtelet and Paul Dubreuil Seminar, founded in 1947, and the Henri Cartan Seminar. From the beginning, the Bourbaki Seminar was not limited to a particular subject and allowed its participants to gain an in-depth understanding of the most recent international scientific literature in various fields of pure mathematics. The selection of relevant literature to be discussed was made by Bourbaki members, but the speakers at the Bourbaki seminar did not necessarily belong to Bourbaki. The Cartan seminar was a thematic seminar organized at the ENS, and it was dominated by Henri Cartan and Jean-Pierre Serre. Its purpose was to discuss the most advanced theories in algebraic topology, at least during the first years of its existence. The Châtelet-du-Bray seminar, for its part, brought together talks on algebra, algebraic geometry, and number theory. The speakers at these three seminars were overwhelmingly from the elite of the ENS in mathematics. According to a quick review for the years 1948-1951, some presentations by Jean Serre, Henri Cartan, and Jean-Pierre Serre, as part of the Cartan seminar, refer to fascicles of the Éléments de mathématique. Several classical concepts or propositions borrowed from the Éléments serve as a starting point for their reasoning. It is also the case with some talks given as part of the Bourbaki and Châtelet-du-Bray seminars. So these three seminars contributed in making the Éléments a standard reference, particularly in the fields of algebra and topology. Conversely, talks given by Bourbaki members at these seminars contributed to the writing of chapters of the Éléments. Samuel talks on the theory of algebras served as a source of inspiration in the writing of chapter 8 of the algebra book. Dick Smith talks at the Bourbaki seminar in 1951-1952, which were devoted to Harish Chandra's last achievements on Lie algebras, then served as a basis for him to write the third draft of the Bourbaki chapter on Lie algebras. Some of the papers presented at the Cartan seminar inspired Bourbaki drafts on algebraic topology and homological algebra, which were not immediately followed by the publication of Bourbaki fascicles. In addition to these seminars, several international conferences in mathematics and in physics were organized by the CNRS with the support of the Rockefeller Foundation after World War II. The Bourbaki group was well represented in 3 of these conferences, and these events therefore contributed to their international reputation in various fields of pure mathematics. I can give 3 examples. Of course, the conference on harmonic analysis in Nancy, but also the conference on algebraic topology in Paris the same year, and finally the conference on algebra and number theory in conjunction with the Châtelet-du-Bray seminar in September 1949. So here are the speakers at the conference on harmonic analysis in Nancy, with 4 active members of Bourbaki taking part in this conference: Henri Cartan, Jean Delsart, Roger Godman, as well as, of course, Laurent Schwartz. The speakers at the conference on algebraic topology have also 2 Bourbaki members, Erasman and Henri Cartan, who took part in this conference. Erasman helping to organize this conference in algebraic topology, which took place in 1947. The Paris International Conference on Algebra and Number Theory brought together prestigious algebraists, number theorists, and algebraic geometers, and 3 Bourbaki members gave a talk in the framework of this conference, namely Claude Chaboty, Jean Dieudonné, as well as Pierre Samuel. So, to sum up with this first part, in his 2010 article on the emergence of the sheaf concept, historian of mathematics Renaud Chorlet argued in particular that the Bourbaki group should be considered from 2 different points of view: as the collective author of the Éléments de mathématique and as a closely connected group of researchers. In the first part, I aim to piece together internal archives relating to the group, as well as documents concerning the participation of Bourbaki members in seminars or conferences of international stature. And just some examples. From all this archival material, it appears that these 2 facets of Bourbaki are closely linked. Indeed, some Bourbaki drafts for the Éléments reflect their research activities, and conversely, The fascicles of the Elements serve as a basis for their own research programs. So in my opinion, the history of Bourbaki group after the Second World War needs to be considered on several scales. A first very localized scale centered around the ENS, so as to understand how the Bourbaki group gained new members, but a second more global scale showing that the group became a collective of internationally renowned researchers who contributed to a thorough reshaping of various branches of mathematics. Second part. So, in Barani-Lutsen-Pommier, the International Congress on Harmonic Analysis in Nancy is considered from the perspective of a global history of the theory of distributions. I wish to show that this conference cannot be treated as an isolated event in Nancy. It marks the beginnings of an international mathematics center in Nancy, which was initiated by Delsart and designed in the interest of Bourbaki. This center officially became the Élie Cartan Institute in July 1953. The choice to name this center in honor of Élie Cartan was justified on three grounds. Élie Cartan was a professor in Nancy. He passed away in 1951, and he was a mentor figure for several Bourbaki members, including, of course, his son Henri Cartan, as well as Erasman or also André Weil. So here's the cover page of the brochure published on the occasion of the creation of the Élie Cartan Institute. This brochure included a history of this mathematical center, a presentation of its status, and a description of its activities in 1952-1953. The composition of the Provisional Executive Board was described therein. So it was chaired by the Dean Edmond Urian, who specialized in chemistry. The executive board of the Institute was composed of 7 members, including Urian. 5 of them belonged to Bourbaki: Delsart, Dieudonné, Godman, Cartan, and Schwartz. So we still need to piece together the history of the research activities that led to the creation of this institute. And a copy of a detailed report on the activities of the mathematics department of the Faculty of Science in Nancy since 1947 can be found in André Weil archives. And this report was written by Jean Delsart and began as follows. Thanks to favorable circumstances, this department has experienced remarkable international development since 1947. The primary instrument of this activity has been the mathematics seminar, which has been operating there since 1948. So here's the first page of the Delsart report, covering the period 47-53, beginning with a description of the International Harmonic Analysis Congress, organized in June 1947. The names of the students which were welcomed in Nancy, the guest lecturers, and the professors up to 1952 were mentioned in this report, as well as the seminar topics and the titles of the advanced mathematical courses. So, for the first year, you have the International Congress in Harmonic Analysis. Second year, 48-49, Bernard Malgrange and André Blanchard from the ENS were welcomed in Nancy for 1 year. Topics of the seminar: algebraic topology, Hilbert spaces. Then, next year, François Bruat and Marcel Berger from the ENS were welcomed at the Institute for 1 year. Topics of the seminar: theory of differentiable manifolds, theory of Lie algebras, theory of hypergroups. Georges Maquet spent 8 months in Nancy, and 2 professors were invited, Marshall Stone and Gottfried Goethe. Next year, so 50-51, 4 foreign students were welcome. Topics of the seminar: integral equations, theory of abelian groups, with many other prestigious mathematicians invited in Nancy. And then 10 foreign students stayed in Nancy in 1951-1952, as well as Malgrange and Jacques Lyons from the ENS. Alexander Grothendieck was in Nancy since 1950. Topics of the seminar: class field theory, analytic manifolds, hypergroups, and algebraic geometry of curves. And we shall mention that 4 foreign professors were also present: Ziegel, Whitney, Jacobson, Hewitt. Several topics covered by this mathematics seminar were also addressed by members of Bourbaki as part of their internal activities devoted to the genesis of the Eléments de mathématique. At that time, Laurent Schwartz wrote a report on differentiable manifolds, which was a topic of this seminar in Nancy, for Bourbaki. At that time, Claude Chevalet also wrote a report on the algebras as part of a book project on the algebras for Bourbaki. And Jean Delsart's main source for his advanced course on this topic in Nancy was based precisely on Chevalet's report. So you have a page of a lecture note by Delsart on the algebras, which are preserved in Nancy in Jean Delsart's archives, and an extract from the Chevalet report on the algebras, and this report being Delsart's main source of inspiration for his advanced course on the algebras in Nancy. Between 1948 and February 1951, 5 Bourbaki congresses were held in Nancy. Several cobayes, young mathematicians likely to join the group, attended the Congress of October 1948 and February 1949, but their names were not specified. So, okay. The minutes of the February 1950 Congress, Bourbaki Congress, are more detailed. We note the presence of Mackay, so he took part of this Congress, this Bourbaki Congress, and the cobayes, François Bruat, Marcel Berger, and also Jean Braconnier, Alexander Grothendieck, and Jean Ries. Braconnier defended a thesis in Nancy in 1945, and Jean Ries also, but a little bit later in 1950. The preparation of the certificate in advanced analysis, Certificat d'analyse supérieure, in Nancy was characterized at that time by the implementation of advanced level courses open to the seminar's attendees. Here is a short list of the topics covered by these courses between 48 and 52: additive number theory, finite group theory, Lie algebras and Lie groups, theory of distributions. So, as already suggested, the theory of Lie groups and Lie algebras was on the agenda of the Bourbaki members at that time for the Eléments project. For the academic year 52-53, Delsart invited a host of prestigious professors with the view of the inauguration of the Élie Cartan Institute. 3 professors were invited to Nancy and Paris throughout the year: Edwards, Hill, Smiths, and 5 speakers were also invited occasionally this year: Deuring, Bureau, Hilton, Stone, and Whitehead. That same year, Delsart, Godman, and Serre offered advanced courses on the following topics: Delsart on analytic theory of quadratic forms, Godman on the theory of Lie algebras again, and was then involved in the first Bourbaki drafts on this topic, and Serre on shift theory and its applications to homology theory. So, back to the 1953 brochure. Article 2 of the Statutes of the Élie Cartan Institute. This institute is an international center for teaching and scientific research in the field of pure mathematics. Its specific function within the framework of the mathematics department of the Faculty of Science in Nancy is to provide advanced teaching courses outside the curriculum, seminars and conferences, and to promote pure mathematics research. Lectures and open courses are given by mathematicians from abroad and French mathematicians who are not part of the regular staff of the faculty. So the institute was therefore defined at its very beginnings as a center for advanced studies and as a research institute. It was aimed at advanced level students, but also at senior mathematicians. Its international dimension is evidenced by its audience, but also by the identities of the guest speakers and members of the patronage comité, comité de patronage, with Georges de Rame and Marshall Stone. It is possible that Delsart found a source of inspiration in the IAS. He was invited there in 1947, and Delsart's research center covered the field of pure mathematics. and was thus the exact counterpart of the Henri Poincaré Institute in Paris. So, some concluding remarks on part 2 of my talk. At the end of World War II, Bourbaki members had several means at their disposal to promote their research programs and their collective work known as the Eléments de mathématique. They set up seminars in Paris, Nancy, but also in Strasbourg, which enabled them to quickly familiarize themselves with international scientific literature and develop their research programs. In particular, this is true with the Cartan seminar. They gained international visibility by participating in international conferences, and I just gave some examples. And finally, they set up an international research center in Nancy with a seminar and advanced courses with the aim of welcoming students from the ENS and abroad, as well as prestigious mathematicians. However, the Nancy Mathematics Center could not compete with the Faculty of Science in Paris in training mathematicians at the academic level. Between 1945 and the early 1950s, only 2 doctoral theses in mathematics were defended in Nancy, that of Braconnier and of Fries. And moreover, the Faculty of Science of Nancy remained a stronghold of Bourbaki until the early 1950s only. Between 1952 and 1956, Delsart had to deal with the successive departures of Laurent Schwartz, then Jean Dieudonné, Roger Godement, and finally Jean-Pierre Serre for the Collège de France. Third part. So, let us recall that in 1945, the publishing enterprise of the Eléments was still in its infancy because of the war and the occupation. At that time, only 4 fascicles had been published. So the fascicle of results in set theory, chapter 1 of the algebra book, and chapter 1 to 4 of the topology book. The publication of the other chapters of the algebra book was delayed due to disagreements, mostly between Chevalet and Dieudonné. By contrast, the other chapters of the topology book were more conceptual and were published at regular intervals until the early 1950s. The topology book gives a good overview of the kind of reform, both conceptual and terminological, that Bourbaki intended to undertake, topology being a field particularly representative of Bourbaki's structural approach in mathematics. So you can see here the table of contents of the topology book, and you can note that appended to the last chapter, chapter 10, there is a dictionary of topology published in 1949. When preparing the topology fascicles, Bourbaki members carried out a major task of comparing the terminology in use within the international scientific literature relating to topology. Their aim was to establish, once and for all, the meaning of classical concepts in topology, for instance, that of compactness, but also to harmonize and unify the terminologies in use in this field. In a 1998 interview with Karine Schemla, Pierre Cartier considered that Bourbaki members had to cope with a terminological chaos in topology, with different terms being used to denote the same concepts or a single term having different meanings depending on the authors. So Bourbaki's dictionary of topology is a comprehensive summary of their conceptual and terminological reform. So here's the first page of the first version of Bourbaki's topological and topology dictionary, and there is just this version in the Bourbaki archives. There is no other version. By putting together terminologies borrowed from several monographs, including those of Alexandre Hopf, Fréchet, Hausdorff, Lefschetz, Newman, Sierpinski, and Weiber. A Bourbaki dictionary project was planned for each of the 6 books composing the part of the Eléments de mathématique entitled The Fundamental Structures of Analysis. And indeed, in addition to the topology dictionary, the Bourbaki group also published a dictionary at the end of book 4 and a dictionary on topological vector spaces. Dictionaries in algebra as well as on integration were also under consideration, but were not published in the end. And certainly because these books had a more tumultuous genesis, particularly the algebra book. At the beginning of the first versions of Bourbaki's topology dictionary, we can read, The words printed in capital letters are terms defined in Book 3 of this treatise. For each of them, reference is made to the chapter and page of that chapter where the term is defined. The other words are either translations into other terminologies or of the words defined in this book, so our book, the Elements, etc., or terms designated notions closely relating to those studied in Book 3, but which it has not been deemed useful to discuss for our purposes. In the latter case, the concept is defined below using the terms that we have defined in the course of the text, namely the element. Okay, so this passage from the Topology Dictionary continues as follows. When a word from a foreign language is not followed by any reference, it must be understood that the term has a unique meaning in the main works written in that language. If this is not the case, the author or authors for whom the word has the indicated meaning are specified. So, this dictionary established a system of correspondences for different terms or for terms from different languages denoting the same concept. It highlighted, if necessary, different uses of the same term according to the authors. It made it possible to identify idiosyncratic meanings in certain treatises to which Bourbaki members referred. In any case, Bourbaki members tried to turn their topology dictionary into the standard reference on questions of terminology in the field of topology. I can give some example. For instance, there is in this dictionary an entire paragraph of on the notion of adherence. Adherence of a set, former terminology, closure of a set, German abgeschlossene Hülle einer Menge, English closure of a set, enclosure of a set. It was only relatively recently that the concept of adherence of a set established itself as one of the essential concepts of topology, due to its usefulness. Before Hausdorff, it was considered with Cantor that the fundamental notions were those of accumulation point and derived set. In French, the word adhérence is preferable to the old term closure because it allows the use of the corresponding adjective adherent to refer to a point of the adherence. So this paragraph provides historical perspective on Cantor and Hausdorff that underpins the conceptual choices made by Bourbaki. Bourbaki's terminological reform is based on a hierarchy of concepts for the most essential concepts according to them, to those considered secondary, and the term adherence is also preferred for reasons of linguistic convenience. Second example with compact. Former terminology, Hausdorff space perfectly compact in itself, F referring to Fréchet. Bicompact Hausdorff space, AH for Alexandrov and Hopf, topology 1935. Until around 1940, compact space or compact space in itself was understood to mean a space E in which any infinite set has at least one accumulation point. If we restrict ourselves to metrizable spaces, compact spaces in the sense of Fréchet are identical to compact spaces defined in chapter 1 of the Eléments, of course. In general, any compact space in the sense of our text is also compact in the sense of Fréchet, and compact spaces in the sense of Fréchet that are not compact in the sense of our text have pathological characteristics and do not come into play in the applications of topology. Note that a compact space in the sense of Lefschetz or bicompact space Alexandrov-Hopf is a space satisfying axiom C, but which is not necessarily separated, and Bourbaki will then make a distinction between quasi-compact and compact spaces. Okay, so even when Bourbaki members relied on a term already in use, they gave it a new meaning, which in their opinion was better suited to, I quote, the applications of topology. During the Bourbaki Congress held in Paris from December 19 to 26, 1947, version 1 of the Topology Dictionary was very well received by Bourbaki members, and which might explain why there won't be a version 2 of this Topology Dictionary. I quote from La Tribu, Topology Dictionary, it was decided to include an introduction to the dictionary which would quote a text by Lavoisier, see the introduction to his treatise on chemistry, in which he explained that it is better for no one to understand anything for 10 years with new and current terminology than to be indefinitely misled by aberrant terminology. Bourbaki members therefore relied on the authority of Antoine Laurent de Lavoisier's Traité élémentaire de chimie, whose preliminary discourse included the following passage. In English, we have endeavored to preserve the names that all substances bear in society. We have only allowed ourselves to change them in two cases. The first with regard to newly discovered substances that had not yet been named. The second when the names adopted either by the ancients or by the moderns seem to us to convey obviously false ideas when they could confuse the substance they designated with others which have different or opposite properties. And here are the passages from Lavoisier's Traité élémentaire de chimie quoted in Bourbaki's Topology Dictionary. So, more generally, the Eléments de mathématique was not intended as a composite collection of existing nomenclatures, terminologies, concepts, and results in pure mathematics. It was conceived from the beginning as a systematic treatise. Bourbaki members did not simply collect and list the prevailing terms in other treatises. They identified inconsistencies and ambiguities. They grouped together different expressions designating the same object and distinguished between related terms which in reality refer to different mathematical structures. Their work, therefore, had a normative character, and the reference to Lavoisier shows that they considered it a new standard in mathematics. So, some concluding remarks relating to this third part. The Bourbaki Topology Dictionary shows that the Eléments ought to constitute, in the eyes of this collective of mathematicians, a new international standard from the point of view of the terminology used, from the point of view of the basic concepts or structures that should make up a treatise on topology. We still need to know what strategies Bourbaki members adopted to ensure that the topology fascicles became a new standard. Firstly, it is now clear that Bourbaki members made use of the fascicles of the element in their own courses. According to Gatien-Ricotier's doctoral thesis, Cartan relied on the topology booklets from 1941-1942 in advanced courses at the ENS. The same goes for Erosman in Strasbourg due to the letters he wrote to Georges de Rame, when he explained that he used the Bourbaki fascicles in topology in his courses. In the case of Bourbaki courses given in Nancy, we can rely on the lecture notes of Denise Huet, who was a mathematics student in Nancy in the early 1950s, and they clearly bear the mark of Laurent Schwartz's interventions to modernize the teaching of differential and integral calculus according to Bourbaki's new standards. Secondly, in their own research articles, Bourbaki members and their allies refer to the fascicles of the Eléments, including those on topology, which they presented as a new standard in mathematics. And this is particularly the case of a small network of mathematicians attached to the Faculty of Science of Nancy at the end of the 1940s and at the beginning of the 1950s, namely Dieudonné, Schwartz, Grothendieck. At that time, they developed an ambitious research program on topological vector spaces as members of the new International Research Institute created under the impetus of Delsart. Their articles were closely connected to each other and all emphasized the Eléments as a standard reference. See, for instance, an extract from an article by Jean Dieudonné and Laurent Schwartz published in 1949, and we can read at the very beginning, nous suivons la terminologie et les notations générales des éléments de Nicolas Bourbaki, and they refer to the book of algebra and of those of topology. And at the end of 1952 article by Alexandre Grothendieck for the American Journal of Mathematics, he introduced himself as a member of the Mathematics Institute in Nancy, and see that at the top of the image, and introducing and with strong references to Bourbaki's topology fascicles, including chapter 10 with its dictionary. So, that's it.
Yes, thank you for showing us some of the world of Bourbaki in the late 40s, early 50s. Questions are welcome. Comments?
So I think that, just to recall Rebecca's comment and question from yesterday, the role of linguistic translation, of course, plays a major is a major part in both articulating commonalities, but also in sort of defining differences and distinctions, not just linguistically, but also conceptually to distinguishing mathematical cultures, and this comes through very clearly. I wonder what you make in that light of Bourbaki's sort of famous interest in multiple meanings, in wordplay, in puns, and to what extent that presented obvious decision points that they made in the composition of the topological dictionary, but also maybe in how the dictionary was received by non-Bourbaki readers, in particular, because already by the late 1940s, one of the primary complaints that non-Bourbaki mathematicians made about Bourbaki is they were simply adding terminology and like renaming existing concepts, pretending to improve the concepts, but merely renaming them. And so that complaint is already in the air when they're working on this dictionary, and how this plays into that would be very interesting to know.
Yes, absolutely. You are right. Yes, I should do that. Yes.
How about notation?
Oh, I didn't work about this topic, but it's quite interesting to work about that, of course. And we have all the drafts, all the Bourbaki drafts, and we can compare the different notations from one draft to another draft. It's quite interesting. And there is also, with the questions of terminology, with surjection, injection, bijection, we have all kind of options explored by the Bourbaki members before choosing bijection, etc. And we have all that in the archival material. But good question, yes.
I was very interested in seeing the development of the Élie Carton Institute, because I knew that the CNRS had given money for international conferences, but I had never seen it playing out in one space in Nancy. So they pooled all their international contacts in, or how did that really develop? I mean, I found that impressive. The people who went to Nancy, I didn't have that on my map.
When I discovered Delsart's report in the André Weil archives, I was quite surprised by the numerous professors who were invited in Nancy, the topics of the seminar, and the variety of the topics which were treated in the framework of this newly created. It's quite surprising, and so I hope Jean-Pierre Serre preserved some notes of all these conferences, etc. Because I have just the titles of these courses and so on. So
Did you ask him?
no, I should.
You should, yeah,
I should.
It's, for me, it's interesting to see, as I have this interest in the history of Oberwolfach, of course, that I wonder what people in Oberwolfach knew about what was going on in Nancy, and they must have known a lot, because there was a close contact between persons from Nancy and Oberwolfach. But that is interesting.
Absolutely.
Jeremy.
Could you say a little bit more about George Mackey?
I think he worked. I think he worked together with Laurent Schwartz, Jean Dieudonné, and Alexander Grothendieck, because there are many references to publications by Mackey in all the articles by Laurent Schwartz, Jean Dieudonné, and Grothendieck at that time, but he had certainly also connections with Roger Godement, I think. So this is the second option to interpret why George Mackay was in Nancy during that time.
Am I right? Everything here goes on in French, right?
Yes.
Sure.
You mentioned that both Vey and Dieudonné spent several years each in Sao Paulo, and I was just interested in the attempt to export and promote and internationalize the Dieudonné ethos. Why were they there? And I gathered there were two actually different international centers that were considered sort of loci of Bourbaki interest. One was Sao Paulo, the other was in Mumbai, Bombay.
Yes.
And I know it was in part because there were people there that wanted to bring members of Bourbaki to those two places, but was there anything within Bourbaki itself that then began to try and promote and encourage those kinds of visits to both Sao Paulo and Bombay?
I didn't work on this topic, but certainly you did. And so I just know that André Weil was in Sao Paulo, and also then Jean Dieudonné in the 1940s, but you know.
Yeah, so part of it is the Rockefeller connection in Sao Paulo. Rockefeller plays a very important role in the foundation of the University of Sao Paulo, and Vey has the previous connection through his transatlantic sort of quasi-refugee movement to the New School that then continues on to Sao Paulo, where there's a little bit of a more stable position because the New York position is always very, both the New York and Pennsylvania positions are always very temporary. So that is the seat of that interest, and Rockefeller then brings other sort of Bourbaki-connected mathematicians to Sao Paulo under that rubric. In Bombay, it goes back even further because Vey has this, since his school days, interest in Sanskrit, and so he takes a kind of chance opportunity to begin his post-doctoral career in Aligarh, where he meets Damodar Kosambi. And Kosambi, by the time Bombay becomes important for Bourbaki, has become the founding director of the Faculty of Mathematics at the Tata Institute. And that's the sort of origin of that connection that then very quickly overtakes Kosambi and ends up being more sort of vested in people like Narasimhan and other Harish Chandra, who then has this transatlantic.
Carol Parikh, in her biography of Zariski, talks a little about this and how it was the State Department that encouraged him to go to Brazil, and that he was a little hesitant, why should I go to the middle of nowhere? And then when he heard that Vey was going to be there, they said, okay, well, maybe I should go. And he did. So there's a way in which this internationalization was being promoted from different perspectives for different reasons.
It worked in the other direction too, because when Omar Katunda applied for both State Department and Rockefeller funding to go to North America, at the time the fact that both Vey and Zariski were in Sao Paulo was given as a reason why they shouldn't bother sending him north, because all of the best mathematicians he should be talking to were already in Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
Just a small question, because it got me thinking about the dictionary. And do you know when? So what is its editorial history afterwards? When did they delete it, and was it ever translated? And if not, do you have any idea why?
I don't know, in fact. So I need to do further research on that. For instance, on the reception of this dictionary, if it was then translated, etc., etc. So I have no idea about it.
Because recent editions I've seen, I don't think they have it, but
Yes.
I haven't done an exhaustive search, so.
Rebecca, David, and
Right at the beginning, there was something on the slide like the work was aimed at, maybe I'm phrasing it a bit differently, it was aimed at making some work by some people, I remember Fréchet, obsolete.
Yes.
This is rather strong language. Could you elaborate on that? I mean,
Oh.
aimed? not by accident, but it was aimed.
Yes,
at
yes,
them.
absolutely. And this is also clear with the historical notes written by Bourbaki in topology, in which they completely neglected the role of Fréchet in topology. They mention him just in passing, insisting on Hausdorff, etc., etc. So there is what I think there was also a kind of competition within the Parisian scene in topology between students of Fréchet and Bourbaki members, and I think it has to do also with conflicts within the mathematical field and how to be more to have more influence than Fréchet and his students. I think it's part of that.
Norbert doesn't believe it. You don't believe it? Or you were
No, I just learned things.
Ah, okay. So you were shaking your head. So David.
Yeah, I would maybe just continue a comment and then a question. The idea of making something obsolete. I mean, this is very crucial in a career like Hilbert's, you know, with invariant theory, of course, famously making everything classical invariant theory go away. And I think it was also very much in his mind, too, when he wrote the Zahlbericht. And so much earlier number theory, in particular Kummer's work and so forth. He wanted to do it a brand new way, and probably when people say, yeah, when does modernism begin and so forth, well, you have to get rid of the old and create the new. So, yeah, that was just a comment, but I was curious if you had anything to say. I mean, I didn't get very much into Bourbaki in graduate school, but my graduate course in algebra was taught out of a textbook by Serge Lang, and who was a very influential, well, I don't know if that's the right word, he was a very prolific textbook writer in the United States. And then there's something about the Bourbaki style. That was what I wanted to ask about. You know, I think people identified him very much that way as you know, by abuse of language and things like this, you know, which for a beginning graduate student is terrible. You know, sort of like, just try. I mean, it was a difficult text, but it had a sort of. That was my take on it. But what you must know something about Serge Lang's style and.
Oh, no, but I know that he was a Bourbaki member. That's clear. Yeah. He produced some Bourbaki drafts. So we have a trace of what he wrote for Bourbaki in the archives.
Any connection, though, between what he did then and maybe that's his own invention? I don't know. He had a very distinctive style, that's for sure.
And it was anything but pedagogical.
Yeah, right.
You know, already by the early 1950s, there are people who make fun of this phrase by abusive language as Bourbaki, distinctive Bourbaki.
Even then.
Yeah, there are letters by non-Bourbaki people who talk about parabole de langage as a way of making fun of them.
Well, and to further comment on the dictionary, the success of the dictionary certainly is limited, right? You give the example of closure set. This is adherence is a word I've seen maybe 3 times in my 40-year career. But then again, I work in English, so I'm not sure. Is it different in French topology?
We use adhérence et point adhérent, yes. So the Bourbaki terminology.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions for Christophe?
But just a comment there. I think of Lang being at Harvard, Matthew, of course, was at Harvard. Some of the opposition when it comes to talking about theory of integration comes from Chicago. Is Harvard a kind of, and then of course the algebraic geometers go one after another to sit at the feet of Grothendieck. Is Harvard a kind of pro-Bourbaki Center for American Mathematics?
In Chicago?
Harvard.
I would say Stone specifically in Chicago before he goes, or in Harvard before he goes to Chicago, is a major promoter of Bourbaki. He reviews a lot of the early Bourbaki books for the Bulletin and elsewhere very positively, and promotes Bourbaki in his articles as well.
How about Lang at Yale?
Certainly, Yale.
Okay, I sat through a lecture course of his at Harvard, so perhaps I got that.
But then Sarah, of course, was a very frequent visitor to Harvard later on.
Okay, that's part of the future you have to deal with, the dissemination of Bourbaki. The German case is very interesting as well, and you will be dealing with that, I know. And yeah. But if there are no further comments or questions for Christophe now, we thank you again. And well, those of you who have a program of this mini workshop know that we have planned on some time for a conclusion, but I don't think we have a formal conclusion. We try to toy around with structures. Maybe it's an appealing word, structure in or for mathematics. And we wanted to cover some aspects that are important in our project, because that's where we started from the classification of finite simple groups. And we touched on many of these things, new structures, so new infrastructures. We just heard about the Eléments Institute and about international context, about funding, about conferences, the importance of conferences. We learned that we were reminded of that frequently during these 2 days and again today. And so I think, I've learned a lot and I've taken a lot of input for our project, which has become much bigger over the last 2 days, never-ending thing. And we've talked about new ways of disseminating mathematics, of doing mathematics. Maybe it's not a new way, because this oral tradition of doing mathematics is really center stage also in the classification project through the conferences and not through printed papers. And interestingly enough, that is something that the German mathematician Helmut Kneser, again one of the persons who were described by contemporaries as one of the last men to know a lot of mathematics. So he had a survey of a lot of fields. And in around 1960, early 1960, when they had this project of making Oberwolfach a Max Planck Institute, which failed, he said that a specific thing about Oberwolfach was that people could meet there and discuss, and mathematics is one of the few disciplines where through meeting you can really produce new research. Physicists cannot do that. They need their, that's what he says. So that is this kind of, there's the new infrastructure, the new way to, the old and rejuvenated way to do mathematics in a way. And I think we learned a lot, and we want to follow up on that. And Rebecca had the suggestion that next week, perhaps, for those who are still here, we do, we are leaving on Thursday and Friday, and we will do a little wrap-up of our classification workshop we had here for the last 3 or 4 weeks then. And we don't yet know when, because apparently it's quite difficult to get a room to squeeze enough people in. So do you want to say a few words about what you thought that we would do? Or?
Yes, I could, just briefly. We think maybe Monday, but we will definitely send around an announcement once it's more clear. And instead of giving a talk or two where we basically give a report of the work that we've done here over the last few weeks, and what we've learned and new questions, we thought about doing something more unusual, and this is inspired by ideas that I got from people here and questions that I got. Why not start at the beginning? So Volker will tell us again how this started, how he got the idea for all this, and how I entered the picture, and how we got the idea for this grant and the first phase of this project. And then I would like to try and map out, and this is much fun with so many blackboards, map out what we think the scope of the project currently is, or could be, because it becomes larger as we speak. And then if there are more people around, so if you would like to come, and maybe some others, then we could catch questions from you and ideas, because I'm sure there are blind spots. I'm sure that you will add new perspectives and more ideas for us. And then in the end, we would maybe have a picture of what the whole thing could become, including dissemination. Because so many people ask me, so when can I read your book? Well, let's talk about how we can disseminate our results. What ways do we have, and for what audiences? And I think it's much more fun if we don't just give a talk or something, but if we have a discussion and people participate and give us ideas. I hope this sounds like fun. Good. So there will be an announcement.
Yes, that's the invitation for next week, and we will carry on anyway. And we have. This thing really irritates me. It's minus 18 minutes now. There will be the reception or the get-together in 10 minutes, as they have changed the. Well, Brigitte sent that around yesterday. Yesterday we thought it was at 5. It will be at 4:30. So we'll have a chance to meet again very soon up there for wine and other refreshments, tea and coffee. And thanks to all of you who have joined. I should mention that Christophe has jumped on the train yesterday and will have to return to Paris today. So it's very kind that you have taken all this trouble to join us. And most of the others have been around anyway. But still, thank you for having joined us for this event, which we found might be a nice, fun event, and I hope you profited from it. So thanks and see you soon.
Thank you.